24th of October 25, it's Friday, and I'm talking about Japan because they've got a new leader, a new Prime Minister. It's the first female leader. I think she's aged about 64. She's meant to be a protege of Mr. Abe, who got assassinated, as I recall, about 2 or 3 years ago. And apparently the new leader resigned, and he thought that Japan needs new workers from other shores. That was his mentality, and also they need to take in more people who are fleeing safety, quote, fleeing safety or whatever. You know, well, that's my impression. But apparently he's had to resign. I don't know if it was just that, but she's come in and apparently she's really tough on this issue. We'll see about that though. I mean, Japan is an interesting country because they're the lowest you can get really of the West, I would call the West, that take in people fleeing, quote, fleeing dangerous places. I'll put that all in quotes. For some reason, these people don't stop in nearby countries, or they end up countries halfway around the world. We don't know if they've considered other countries, what countries they've considered. Have they ruled out countries, continents? If so, why? Have they ruled out countries due to religious reasons? By that I mean the same religion or whatever, but yeah. So anyway, she's come in and they're saying things that she would rather, this is maybe a quote, she would rather see the Japanese population shrink than change. Well, that's the way I'm putting it for YouTube. I mean, that would be a fantastic attitude. But Japan was already you've got the three things. You've got legal, you've got illegal, and you've got, quote, fleeing dangerous countries, and there was nowhere else that nowhere closer they could go for safety, like a neighbouring country or whatever. On that last issue, Japan are not notoriously, they're really known to be, well, they take hardly any. You're talking about 2,000 or 3,000 from what I remember a year, so they're taking hardly any of that type. If you compare that to Britain and America, where the attitude is from the elite is that we've got to take in everyone, basically, from the elite and the left. Their attitude is, when I say elite, I mean the elite, the leaders of the parties, apart from Reform now, they're the first ones to sort of break that thing to a degree anyway, definitely in rhetoric or whatever. And yeah, but it seems like Japan's changing slightly the other way through legal. Although I just checked the records, and for 2025 it was estimated that maybe they've got 3.5 million foreign born, considering in a country of say 120 million or something, it's a very small amount. I mean, ours about 3% or something. If you compare that to Britain, which is around about 20-25%, maybe 30%, America's 40-45%. So Japan's been known to be very strict on this already. Personally, I think you would see issues to do with this down at the 3%, because if you think of Britain, I mean, we started changing in 1948, but really straight away there was questions in Parliament about Windrush and that, how did it get in, or whatever, is this going to happen again? Straight away there was things through the 50s. I think there was some talk. The first real clampdown on it was 1964 by Rab Butler, the Home Secretary at the time of the Tories, and he was meant to have done it to make it sort of, slow down, I would imagine, but maybe even stop, I don't know. But anyway, but he also put in that since there was a dam being made in the Mirpur region, a lot of Mirpur people should come to Britain. I don't know why, he decided that. Maybe the North of England wanted them for textile factories or something, I don't know. But and the rest is history, really. So that was Rab Butler. I wonder if we can think of that. But apparently that was our first big immigration thing since around about 1905, when the first one was done, and that was to do with people fleeing East Europe. Um, yeah, if you look at that, it was the Prime Minister at the time was Lord Balfour. That was our first ever immigration policy. And then in 1917, he said a homeland that Britain were taking over in the Middle East. That was for two peoples. That's what Balfour said in 1917. And the rest is history about that as well. So, yeah. So I'm just trying to look further in this. I'm just seeing that is she going to be as strong as us as people are making it? It's hard to say because I think the whole West is now going that way. It depends on your point of view. Maybe your point of view might be, well, they're finally coming to a common sense view about it. We've had 75 years of it and we can sort of judge it. Yeah, because all the terrible things that happen in the Manchester bombing and stuff like that, you've not to think of politicians, who go on about how good it is for us, this issue is for us. But when things like Manchester bombing, we've not to associate that with them. They said it's going to be good. Plus, nobody gets sued about that. Nobody sues the government to say we're going to sue you because you shouldn't have let this person in. That doesn't happen in any of these situations. So it just seems to keep going, and I'm not sure anybody really knows why, but we've been told it's for the economy, and that's all that matters, basically. But like if you've got a winning football team and you change that football team entirely, is it going to be the same football team? Is it going to have the same success? Our elite politicians seem to think so, but anyway, on to this. I'll just look up Grok and that and see what they say. I was just looking to see what Grok said. I mean, Gemini I thought was too biased and wasn't really, not biased, I think, to meet my view. I think it was too biased, too rosy, basically. So, her name is Sani Takehachi. And it's interesting that Japan is part of the West. I consider it part of the West. The people there seem happy there and they don't tend to move, say, to Britain or America in big numbers at all. They seem very happy there. Yeah, and it makes you realise that you can't say the R word about this issue because Japan don't fit that. Whereas China and India, they're going to be the first and second biggest economies probably. They're growing at around about 5%, 6% a year. But it seems that the trend is for the people there to move out of those countries, even though that's where all the economy of the world is happening, really. But whereas in Japan, they're always talking about how they've got deflation and that. Yet the people still like living there. They don't move out in big numbers. The other thing is that politicians of the left and economists and lots of people say confidently, we need new people in for to keep the economy growing, and that. And yet Japan's been deflated for about 30 years or something, and the people still live there, and they seem to be happy. It doesn't seem to be about happiness, really. I don't know, but really the only thing we're getting judged on is the economy, economic growth, just the top line thing. It's not even growth per person. It's growth just in general. And at the moment, well, Britain's been about 1% growth for about 10 since 2008, really. I think. Yeah, and yeah, so she's saying that she would rather the population drops rather than increasing it from overseas or something. That's what people are saying. She said. I don't know if she has actually said it. But anyway, yeah, she hasn't been elected. She won a leadership election within her party. And apparently she's she's had to rely on a smaller party who are even more, whatever they view as stricter or common sense or both, um, on this. So maybe they had to elect someone to please that party. Maybe you could think of them like being reformed, this smaller party. Although that's not to be a slight in reform, because they're going to be a massive party. They're probably going to win Britain, really. Well, for the moment, until Advance start putting candidates up, I think. Um, yeah. So he was only in term for 1 year in office, or the previous guy. Um, she's a protege of Shinzo Abe, and she's got that forming a coalition with a smaller populist party to ensure a majority. And it's funny how they call these parties populist. Populist in that the public like what they're saying. It's a bit ironic. Does she think this is good? No, does not appear to view this positively. In fact, her positions on early action suggest a strong preference for Japan remaining the way it was. So she's going to bring, sort of saying, strict controls, prioritising identity over diversity, and here's a breakdown of her on her record on recent developments. She is an ultra conservative, so that means she may be an economic conservative as well, and all that as well, and that I'm not interested in all that. I think we should just be voting one issue now, because depending, it's okay to say we're going to be a utopia. I think apart from reform, most parties in Britain would say, the leaders would say, we're heading for utopia. Possibly the opposite of that is anarchy. But if you were to think that, you might get arrested. At the moment, you're not allowed to think it's anarchy, which makes you think, well, why have there's no chance of anarchy? Dr. Professor David Bates, he's a military historian. He wrote a paper on this about a few years ago, and now he thinks maybe we're heading for civil trouble in 5 years' time, and that was about that was about half a year ago. He said that 6 months ago. So I don't know. You can look him up, David Bates, and he's not politically. He's judging it as a military historian or something. He's not politically biased about it. In fact, he just done his paper. That was it. He didn't expect anything else. But somebody from associated with the New Culture Forum, I think it was Poppy, saw the paper and contacted him. And since then, he's become a bit of a. Well, he's done interviews and that on YouTube and that, which I'm very welcome. He's done. So far he hasn't been arrested, so that's a good sign that we're not totally Stasi country yet, although we're very close to that, really. So back onto this. Yeah, she regularly visits the Yakushuni shrine. She advocates for revising Japan's pacifist constitution to bolster the military. Yeah, I agree with that. And has opposed progressive social reforms like that and separate surnames. I mean, I don't feel that way, really. Well, I think only one issue matters, so it doesn't really matter all these things in a way. But so she might be across the board, sort of socially conservative and on this issue as well. One of her first moves as PM was to establish a new ministry focused on mass of disrespectful. So, well, that's quite broad. That could mean anything. So, but it sounds good to me. Or illegal. So, I mean, there should be no illegal one anyway. So, that's common sense, really. But it's good that Japan's leading the way then, I suppose. And they don't have any EU to bother about or anything like that. This directly reverses the more open policies under Ishiba, that's her predecessor, right, who had expanded worker visas. He'd done a deal to bring in 500,000 Indians by 2030. And I'm almost surprised that Modi, he sees Indians, especially these young as something to as a bargaining chip. It seems to be only for the West, really. I think from what I've seen, the West have always to take in things, and Keir Starmer just turned in a year recently. Um, yeah, I mean, to me, it's does he not need them for India, and is it not a lack of honour or whatever? Uh, you know, is it not a bit degrading? Obviously not. And should these young Indians, why do they want to leave? Because it seems that they want to move to the West. Why? What is it they don't like? Well, why do they want to move? Basically, just leave it at that. And have they thought of any countries apart from the West? Did they do these deals with the West as well? Um, so, to address labour shortages amid Japan's ageing population, we always hear about this, but I'm always thinking, I mean, economists are always telling you we need new people in these countries, and even Elon Musk says it and stuff, but personally I'm thinking that AI is going to do away with a lot of jobs. I mean, I can see a lot of public facing jobs doing away, taxi drivers, truck drivers, the whole driving thing, warehouse stuff, even shopping. I would imagine there's soon going to be a time where you just go out in your trolley and it scans it all as you're walking through some sort of scanner. I mean, you can already use your phone to scan your stuff. Yeah, I think all these jobs are going to go. So I see it the other way. I think we're going to have huge unemployment problems, even if we get tiny amount of youth. So yeah, and it's one of these things that the economists just speak as if total confidence. They're getting maybe £100 a year, £150, or they've got a mansion, they never think maybe this AI thing's going to ruin the model that I'm talking about. They don't seem to bother. It's like psychiatrists in the NHS. It doesn't matter if their patients don't get better as long as they don't die or whatever. If they don't get better, it doesn't really matter. And if in 10 years' time it turns out that all the psychiatric drugs were actually making the people worse, that doesn't matter either. They just keep going with their 150,000. I mean, Tony Blair said that about the public sector. He says, unlike the private sector, if it's totally failing, it just keeps going. It doesn't really matter. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not against the public sector as a sort of, like a Tory is or whatever. I don't believe in tiny state or whatever, just for the sake of it. But competence, yeah, there's a big thing to do about it with that, yeah, I think. Yeah, so, I mean, I was just watching Liz Truss there on New Culture Forum, and I thought she was brilliant. I really like listening to her. I mean, I've not got a comment on her tax stuff and that, or her economic stuff, but just how she assesses things. Yeah, I think she's really talented. I think she'll come back, probably with reform, or maybe even advance. Anyway, so looking at this anyway, Taki Hatch's approach, this is a new Prime Minister, targets unassimilated groups like Bangladeshis and Kurds, framing immigration as a threat to social cohesion rather than an opportunity for multi. Public support for this shift stems from concerns over crime, wage depression and cultural clashes. See, this sort of thing we should have a referendum on it. It's so big a change. We should have a referendum on it. In Britain we should have had one in 1948, 58, 68, 78, 88, 98, etc. In Japan I would imagine the same thing, but because we've got party hamper systems, it sort of gets shuffled in there and nobody does anything about it, and everyone's too scared to in case they get called the R word or whatever. But now we're in desperate times, and for Japan, these desperate times are when the population's changed about 3.5% or something. It's hardly changed at all, but they're probably noticing it. It's like how it was noticed in Britain in the 60s. Public support for this shift stems from concern over crime, wage depression and cultural clashes. And contrast with predecessor, Ishiba acknowledged the need for foreign labour and coexistence, humanitarian aid expanding worker programmes, which some saw as a pragmatic step towards multi. However, this backfired politically, fueling right-wing backlash and contributing to its ouster. Well, they're saying that, but was it the public that didn't want it? Was it the Japanese? Is that what they sensed? Takeachi represents a sharp pivot back to Yoshiba's critics within the LDP, who prioritise protecting Japanese society over diversity. So, in immigration, she's going to be strict controls, going to be mass on that for disrespectful foreigners. Evidence rejects diversity as a solution to labour shortages, sees it as a cultural risk. So there's I'll just miss that for now. Economic angle, stimulus via domestic focus, e.g. nuclear revival. Yeah, I think Japan get rid of their nuclear stuff because of that accident, which was probably a mistake, same as Germany. Avoids reliance on foreign workers, favouring self-sufficiency over diverse inflows. So, yeah, it's going to be a big, hopefully this is going to be the way that all the West will go, in my opinion, because one way to view it is common sense, another way to view it is it's a big change from what's happened, and if you feel that way, you should vote left, the Greens or a new identity parties on this subject. Yeah, but and they're saying all this. Well, I'll check what I've got on Google. Wait a minute. This is what Google says it's changed. They're saying it's approximately around nearly 4 million. Could be 4 million. They're saying the countries are China mostly, Vietnam, South Korea, Philippines, Nepal, Brazil. That was a surprise. Indonesia. But I think they said a different list. I think I'll need to go and check what Grok said. So they're talking about maybe 4 million. Well, Grok's saying the same actually. So around about 4 million or 3.7 million. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. There's the US. That's nice in a way. I don't know. Yeah. So I think South Koreans is something to do with some permanent residence deal or something. I don't know. I've seen it. And there's another 26% that are not on that list to come from over 190 other countries. Anyway, well, that's all I've got to say on that. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes, Could this be the change that's going to happen all over the West? Well, it is happening already, really, especially in the USA. But I don't know by how much, though. It might be smoke and mirrors, But yeah, that's all I've got to say on that. Okay.